Hey guys, how's it going? In the last video we looked at how to make a web application in Node.js, and we did manage to make one in a couple of seconds, so that went quite well. So in this one we'll be looking at what npm did for us in the last video, and sort of bits and pieces about how they come together and all of that stuff. So we'll be looking at that in this video, so let's get started. First of all, I'm going to switch to my favorite text editor, which is brackets. I think it's pretty cool. You can use whatever you want. There's no restriction, but this is just what I use. So let's look at package.json. First of all, so npm created this file for us, and it wrote a couple of things in it, 17 lines, which we didn't have to, which is quite cool. So let's look at what it did. Package.json is essentially a JSON file. It has a couple of things in it. Everything's in a key attribute form, so that's a key attribute, and they all are comma separated, so key attributes are comma separated. Anything with a curly bracket around is an object. In this case, the whole file is an object containing these attributes, and with one attribute containing another sub-object. So essentially just consider these brackets as things that contain groups of attributes. That's an easier way of thinking about it for now. We'll cover more about how JSON works and all of that stuff later on in the Node tutorials. But for now, I think that's a very simple explanation of how it is, of what it is, in fact. So essentially, the first thing that you see is a name, which is hello node in this case, version, which is a version number. So you can have 1.0.0 or 0.0.1. I normally tend to keep it 0.0.0 until I make some changes to the default version, and then I switch that to 1, and then I commit that new change to the Git repository. The third attribute is private equals true. Now this is not going to be a concern for you guys right now, because what it essentially tells npm is do not publish this project until this is changed to false. And what publish means is if your project is a module or contains public modules or contains modules that you want to publish, then you need to change this to false. This is more of a safety mechanism so that you don't accidentally publish your project to the world and then you're just like, oh my god, what have I done? So that's a good thing. Then the next thing is scripts. It tells npm what to run when whatever command is executed. So when you do npm start, this command is executed. When you do npm test, then you want to map test to this. So you can add something like test, caps lock, test, and then you can have something like, I don't know, a node test .js, wherever, and then you can test stuff using that. For now, we don't need that, so let's keep it as it is. Next thing is dependencies. This is a very important thing. This is where all of your project dependencies are stored, so you don't want to touch it, and you want to let npm manage it. I'll show you guys how to install dependencies later on, but for now, let's just say that all of the dependencies are stored here by default. Yeah, so you can see each dependency. In the last video we covered that Express had several dependencies of its own. npm doesn't record the sub-dependencies, npm just records the module that's at the top level and puts it down in here, and when npm looks at it again and says, oh, I need Express, then it gets it for you. Ideally what you should be doing is you shouldn't be committing node_modules folder in your Git repository, which is where this comes in use, because if you don't commit the node modules folder, which means your project, when pulled by someone else, wouldn't have those node modules, and hence they will need to reinstall those. This file will be extremely useful because npm on their computer will just look at this file and will say, oh, I need these modules, I'll get it for you immediately, and it will get them for you. So if you're like me, you'll be wondering what these tildes are. Tildes are, so what they essentially tell npm is get this version 4.9 with latest minor version. So 4.9.9 will be retrieved even if we have 4.9.0 here. We can change this to hat, which means that get the latest major version, which means if this is, say, for instance, if this by default was 4.7, and if we had the hat on, that meant that will tell npm that if 4.9 is available, then get 4.9, even though we have 4.7 here. But hat will never get version 5 for you. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's restore it back to its original state. So yeah, that's essentially what tilde is. Tilde says, get me the latest minor version. Hat says, get me the latest major version. So that's it for package.json. Let's move on to a interesting file called app.js. Now, the reason app.js is interesting is because it's there in the root of the project. It's the only JavaScript file that's outside the folder structure, and you know it's called app, so it's pretty interesting. So the first couple of lines, you don't need to worry about this. This is all imports. So it says I need to import these modules, and then it says I'm going to require these two files. Now, the reason why I said that these are files and not modules is because they have dot in front of them, and they say that in the current directory, roots folder, index file, and it automatically assumes that the file is a JavaScript file that you're trying to include. So in our case, it's inside roots index.js file. The same is with the next line, which is for users equals require root/users. This gets the users file and retrieves the module and stores it into this folder. Now let's have a look at the index file quickly. The index file is very simple. Index file just says I require express, and I'm going to create a new router, and I'm going to say router.get that, and then I'm going to export the router. So this line here is important because app.js says I require this file, and whatever is returned by the require function is assigned to roots. Now, how do you make sure that you return the right object? Well, you do module.export equals that, and that automatically does the return on the require. So that's pretty neat, you know. So yeah, so that's essentially what index.js is. The same thing is with users.js. Users.js is a similar file. It has express, router it has the same structure, and it's got this stuff in. Now you might be wondering why the parts are same. We'll cover that in a minute, so just hold on to your horses. Let's look at app.js quickly. App.js says I require these two files, and after that it says I'm going to initialize the Express module. Express is a web application framework for Node.js. It's pretty cool stuff. It helps you build web applications and APIs on Node. The Express generator that we used is part of Express because it helps you make the Express application. Oops, pardon. And yeah, so that's essentially just getting the app object from the Express. So we're initializing Express there. Then we're setting the view engine stuff. So essentially, we're telling Express that our views are inside the views folder, which is this folder right here. And this just says path.join the current directory name /views. You know, so it's very simple. And it says view engine Jade. Now this is interesting as well. That's because Node is server-side. It's server-side JavaScript. It doesn't run on the client. It does not run in your browser. It runs on your server in the back end. And Express, along with Node, helps you serve pages. Now, what View Engine is it's a templating engine, essentially. Not sure if you have heard of templating engine before. If not, I encourage you to look up templating engine on Google. It's a really cool thing. What it essentially does is it takes a HTML file, or actually any file, in fact, but normally HTML files. Majority of the time, HTML files. It takes a HTML file and allows you to put stuff inside that HTML file. So you can have a variable defined here. You can pass your variable down to your templating engine, and wherever your variable appears in the templating engine in a specific syntax, it will replace the value of the variable with that. So in our case, we're using Jade templating engine. Now I'm about to show you the Jade file, so don't panic. We'll cover this very slowly in a couple of sessions, but this is what it looks like. And you know the variables that I told you about? These are the variables in our case. So title and hash title are variables. Hash title is an inline mention of a variable, and just title is because we have got an equals here. So it says fill h1 tag with the value of this variable called title. And speaking of Jade, let's cover Jade right now actually. In this file, we're extending layout, so it says extends layout, and then defines block content here. What is layout? Well, layout is layout.jade. Layout.jade defines the layout of your page, so it defines content of your page. So it says this is of type HTML, and I've got a HTML tag here, I've got head here, then I've got title, then I've got link to a style sheet, then I've got body tag, and then I've got block content here. And in the other file, in the index.jade file, we have redefined block content here. So we've said block content is this stuff after this. So that's essentially what it is. Now, you might be wondering that this is not HTML. You're right, this is not HTML. This is a Jade file. The difference between a Jade file and a normal HTML file is, well, as you can see, it has no opening and closing tags. It has a tag, and then you tab or space, so two spaces, and you put another tag. And the spaces tell Jade that this tag is inside that tag. Simple? So if you've done any kind of Python programming before, this will be a very simple concept for you. You'll pick up Jade very quickly. And I think it's pretty cool because it keeps the code very neat. It's very self-organizing code kind of, because you are forced to put everything in tabs and stuff. I can give you countless occurrences of times. I can give countless examples when I've seen horribly formatted HTML code without tabs, and I've just gone like, this is horrible, and so Jade will force people to keep it clean. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, we've got index.jade defined here, which is extending the layout. So we already have layout around this code. Around this code, we have the layout code, which is this stuff, and Jade will combine these two, and then we'll serve the page. Now we're defining Jade here. We're saying that this application will use the Jade view engine. But if you go to index.js, we're saying that whenever this happens, I'll explain this in a minute, but whenever this happens, I want to render the index page, and I want to send this object in. So I want to send a variable with name title, and I want to set the value of that to express. And what's that doing in Jade? Well, if you look at the Jade file of index, you'll see that there's title here, title, and that's essentially what it is. So if we quickly run the project, so if we do npm start, got the project running, fire up my favorite browser, go to localhost 3000, and here we go. So we have express. The reason why you see express here is because we have defined express here. We have said express. If we say something like my title and save that, we have to restart this and restart our server, then reload the page. You'll see my title there. So yeah, despite the fact that it's bad practice, I don't know why it's crept into the Express generator code, but layout.jade, which is a parent file, also uses the title variable. It's ideal. It's not. I mean, I guess it's not ideal. I guess it's not bad practice, but I personally hate sharing variables across files. You should be, doing it clean. I mean, you should be hard coding the title there in layout.jade to make it clean, so that layout.jade doesn't depend on index.js. But we'll cover all of that stuff later on. Anyway, so continuing on app.js, if we go down, you can see that we're using logger, we're doing all of this stuff. Don't worry about this stuff now, we'll take care of that later. And here we go. So, and we're saying that use /roots. And we have defined roots here. So we're getting the index.js file, we're storing it inside a variable called roots, and then we're saying that map roots to /. Now what / is its base URL. So this means that whenever I am in browser and if I hit /, which is the default endpoint, I want to hit my index.js file. So, and our index.js file says whenever I get /, I want to execute this function. And when you execute this function, I want you to provide REQ and RES to this function. Now, if you don't know how JavaScript works, I encourage you to look at Code Academy. I will try to be as detailed and as easygoing as possible on JavaScript. I won't be speaking in jargons and doing all of that stuff. But so have a look at the Code Academy tutorials. But for now, I'll assume that you guys know what a function is and what these variables are. I'll explain to you guys what these variables are in this context, but I assume that you guys know how to pass variables to a function. Anyway, so we're saying that whenever you hit a call, whenever you get a call to /, which is the base URL, I want you to call a function which I've defined here in line. And when you call the function, I want you to pass in two objects, one called REQ, which stands for the request object in this case, and RES, which stands for the response object, again in this case. And when you hit this function, I want this function to execute that line. So I want to say response.render, so render this stuff as your response. And the first argument is the file name. You don't have to suffix .jade to it. You just have to put in the file name. In our case, it's this index. And to the file, I want to send this object. And this object contains one variable called title and a value of my title. Now, when this line gets called, so whenever I hit this, although this stuff happens in a matter of milliseconds, I'm going to break it down to you very slowly. So whenever you hit like enter there, this gets called, this hits, it calls this function with REQ and RES variables, it runs the res.render line, it goes up to here, looks at this, it says, oh, I need to load the index page, and it looks at this and it says, oh, I need to pass this variable to Jade to render the index page. Jade looks at index.jade, sees, oh, I need to extend a file called layout, looks at the layout.jade, starts rendering doc-type HTML, HTML head, looks at title equals title and says, ooh, title equals title. What is title? I don't know what title is. Looks at this that you passed in, says, oh, okay, title is equal to my title, goes back to layout.jade, switches back to what it was doing before, replaces that to my title, looks at link, creates a HTML link tag, closes the head tag here, creates a new body tag, and says, okay, I don't know what block content is. Looks back at index.jade and says, oh, okay, block content has been defined here, and starts appending this stuff onto here. And it says, okay, h1 equals title. Oh, okay, I already know what title is. Title is my title, so it replaces that. So puts my title inside h1 tag, closes the h1 tag, obviously, creates a new p tag, puts in welcome to, and says hash that stuff, and it says, oh, okay, I know what hash curly bracket title close curly bracket is. It's equal to my title, so puts in my title there, closes the p tag, goes back to layout.jade, closes the body tag, closes the HTML tag, and that's done. It passes the rendered HTML back to Express, and what Express does is Express renders, so it sends the index.html file back to the client, which is when you see it on the screen here. Oh, okay, so I hope that was helpful, guys. So essentially, that's what it is. That's how it all works. It's very, very simple. Now, let's look at an interesting bit, which is inside users.js. So if we switch to users.js, you'll see that it has same thing, base URL, and that. And if we look at the app.js, you'll see that users is mapped at /users. But hang on a minute. Index.js says I'm going to get /, so that's fair enough. So when you press enter on /, it renders index. But how does users work? It's also mapping to the same URL. Well, not quite. If you look at app.js, app.js says I'm going to map users to /users. So the base for users is already /users. When you are referring to / in users, this means /users /. You see? So if I want to access users, my URL will be /users. Respond to the resource. If I change this to something else, say users / my users, save that, switch back to that, close the server, turn the server back on, and then go back here. And if I refresh this is not going to work because it says 404 not found. But if I go again / my users, respond to the resource, so we've hit the right URL. So again, this is the base path for this file, but its final base path is in app.js, which is /users. So I hope that was useful. I can cover more about it in the next videos. We will be going through quite a detailed session on how to write pages and stuff and do all of that cool stuff. But yeah, essentially that's what it is. So moving on, this is all error handling stuff. Catch 404 and forward to the next error handler. Next one is also error handling. This is development error handler and production error handler. So if you're in development, it checks if the environment is set to development. Then I'm gonna give detailed error messages. But if I'm in production, then I'm gonna keep error messages concise, and I'm only gonna respond in terms of codes. So I'll say 500, but I'm not gonna say what caused 500. This is very useful because when you're in production, when you're hosting a website, you don't want a person using the site to know what the exact problem was, what went wrong, because that can give hackers and crackers information about your site, and then you will have your site hacked and all of the bad stuff will happen. So that's why we have the production error handler set as a separate thing than the development error handler. By default, it will be in development, but yeah. One final piece to this puzzle is bin www. We saw this in package.json. So if we look at package.json, we are running nodes bin /www file. This is again a JavaScript file. It has no JavaScript extension, which is why brackets just goes, I don't know what this file is, and it doesn't format it correctly. But this is a JavaScript file. As you can see, it's all JavaScript, var debug, blah 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 blah. What we're essentially doing here is we're setting the port to be 3000, or we're saying environment.port. So get the port from the environment, but if the environment port is not available, then a hard code the port to 3000. This is very useful because when you deploy to PaaS environments like Heroku, you will get port as part of your environment rather than getting rather than you being able to set a hard-coded value. So that's very useful. And then you are running a service who are saying app.listen to this port. So get the port. So that port, get the port, and then when you've finished listening, call this function here, which says I'm gonna debug that line, and essentially that's what it is. So that's what it is, guys. So I think that's it for this tutorial. Actually, no, let's cover one more thing quickly. So it creates another folder called public, as you can see, and public contains images, JavaScript, and style sheets. So if in your Jade file, if you're referring to a JavaScript file, to a JavaScript library like bootstrap.js or something like that, then you want to pop that in the JavaScript folder. And if you're referring to a style sheet, like again bootstrap.css, then you want to pop that in here. If you're referring to any images, you want to pop that in here. And the way you reference it in code is by just saying, I'm link aria blah blah blah. href is /stylesheet/style.css. So you can refer to these folders directly as root. So if you're referring to a JavaScript, it will be /javascripts/bootstrap.js. If you're referring to an image, it will be /images/blah.image. So blah.jpg or png or jpeg or yeah, whatever. So essentially that's what it is. So yeah, that's it for this tutorial. We'll be covering more Node stuff in the coming videos, so stay tuned. Apart from that, if you've got any questions, pop them down in the comments below. I'll try to answer them as quickly as I can. But yeah, that's it for this video. Cheers guys, thank you very much, bye.